that's not going to work.
That's right.
Yeah.
Those wet noodle team sergeants, I call them wet noodles because they kind of just bend and they're kind of like Gumby, and they think that's the right way of leading. But the reality is when you're around a whole bunch of real, truly apex meat eaters, like that one, you got to listen to them because they will have good ideas and they will execute at a phenomenal level. But if you don't listen to them, and then if you don't make a decision, they will eat you up.
Oh yeah.
You know, when you know that you're maxing and you're going on the extended scale for the PT test,
Yeah.
That's where you should be at before you come to selection.
Yeah. What's going on, folks? Welcome back to Beyond the Beret. Today I still call him CSM just because we're ingrained in the military, even though he's retired. It's just a sign of respect for me. Bill Haynes, he was the Command Sergeant Major for 2nd Special Warfare Training Group. Hell, he was my Command Sergeant Major whenever I was the first son over there. And I wanted to invite him on to tell his story and also share with you guys what he has going on post-military. With all that said, CSM, welcome to the show.
Jay, thanks for having me, man.
Of
and
course.
I got to tell you, our time together at 2nd Training Group, that was a pretty good time. And
Yeah.
I always enjoyed coming out there as a 6th Battalion where you guys were at, where you were a first sergeant. It was definitely a pleasure serving with you.
Same here. But with all that said, let's figure out exactly, because like we see all these guys at work, right? There was you, there was CSM on Montez, which I'm still working on him because I want him to come on. But we never really know those guys' stories, and I know there's Vietnam era guys down at the VFWs and all these guys with all these different stories and backgrounds that I wish I knew. You know what I mean? So I'm hoping this podcast opens the door for some of these guys to come tell their stories, because it doesn't have to do with, like war stories or leaking secretive stuff. I get it. We don't care about any of that. I just want to humanize like us and show these guys that, hey, if CSM Haynes could do it, like why can't you as a young man growing wherever, right? You can do it too. We're all human beings here. So with all that said, we'll take it all the way back. Where are you from? How was upbringing for you? And what led you to joining the military?
Yeah, Jay. So talking about the story, I think that in general in the Army, we do a horrible job of kind of explaining who we are, where we come from. I think we kind of tell that story to our close group, but then to the larger audience, we kind of miss that. I didn't start doing that till the very end, and it was already too late at that point. But hey, so I got 3 other siblings. I got a twin brother who also served in special operations, and my family. My dad was in the military, so big Army brat kind of family. Traveled a lot, spent a lot of time over in Europe. Fortunate for me, my dad made a career of it. He retired as a Command Sergeant Major. Was really proud of, what my dad was able to accomplish and what he did during his time in the military. I idolized the idea of going out there and fighting bad people and standing for what's right and what's good and believing in, the Constitution. So it was kind of easy for me to fall into the footsteps of the military. But I will tell you that as I was growing up, it was my brother and I were in the 3rd grade at the time. My dad got stationed at Bad Tolz, Germany, where that's where 10th Group was at for a long time after World War II. That was my first exposure to Special Forces. And everything from the DUI that I idolized as a little kid to seeing the guys jumping out of aircrafts and doing their training. One specific, there was a Huey that came over near the school, and there were dudes rappelling out, and then they had their M16s with a blank adapter shooting some blanks when they got on the ground. Now, to be totally honest, now that I kind of reflect back on that event, it was pretty cheesy and pretty canned, right? They really didn't do much tactically after they got on the ground. But they did give my brother and I a chance to fire the M16. And even though it was blanks, we thought it was the coolest thing ever, right? And it was kind of like the highlight of that time there in Bad Tolz. So what I do remember is there was an airstrip out there at Bad Tolz. And I remember at night, C-130 taking off. And I always, in my mind thinking, who's on the plane? Where are they going? It's got to be Green Berets doing cool shit. And that's where I think the seed got planted. Let me back up real quick, too, because there was another seed that got planted pretty early in my brother and I's life. So when we were young, one of the first memories I have is that my dad was in Korea. He got stationed there for the year. And during that time, we lived in Oklahoma. And my brother and I, for whatever reason, and I'm going to assume my dad planted the seed, was talking. We always talked about airborne this and airborne that. And we started jumping off our bunk beds. And next thing you know, we're jumping out the window of the house, right? And of course, when my mom found out, because we kept doing racetracks, out the window through the front door, and she's like, "Man, they keep coming out of the front door. I don't ever see them leaving." So she started to investigate, and of course, she forbid us from jumping out the window of the house. But that was kind of our thing: airborne, then Bad Tolts, Green Berets. As I went through high school in the '90s, I graduated in '90, so '80, in the '80s, graduated in '90. I remember getting on the college hype, right? Because that's what Mom wanted us to do. She didn't want us doing the other stuff. Thought the importance was get the college degree. I tried college out, and although I didn't do horrible at it, I wasn't excelling. Mm-hmm. And I knew that since I wasn't excelling at college, that I needed to go do something else. And I started asking myself, what do I really want to do? And I went back to those two seeds, right, that was planted early on. So talked with my dad. My dad gave me good advice. He said, look, if you're going to go in the military and you see yourself coming out after 4 years, then go get an MOS that's going to give you a trade or something that you're going to be able to take out with you when you get back to the civilian world. He said, if you're looking at making it in the military as a career, then you need to go combat arms. You need to go infantry. And when there's cutbacks and they start cutting back the infantry, if you're airborne, they can always take airborne and make them infantry guys. And if you go ranger, they can always take rangers and make them airborne guys. Mm-hmm. And if you go SF, then you can always do the full spectrum, right? And so job security, the more credentialing you have, the more opportunities you have to go do different things. And when budget cuts happen, and they always do, and we're seeing it now, man, you don't want to be the low guy on the rung. Yeah. So go out there and get more stuff to your, to your records, to your qualifications, so that you have diversification, and the Army can do a lot with you then. So I chose the infantry route. Got an airborne ranger contract. It was a great story. I'm at MEPS. I'd done my ASVAB. I didn't know how well I did on that because I didn't give me the score yet. Went through the whole physical thing. I had planned that my dad was going to come up and review my paperwork because I didn't know what all those codes and all those things meant, and I was afraid that the recruiters are going to take advantage of me. So I'm in there, and I'm Haynes. I'm thinking I'm going to get called kind of middle of the road. They'll probably start alphabetical like the Army typically does, right? Mm-hmm. I'm the second guy called in, and I'm like, okay, that's weird. And my dad isn't here yet, so I got to stall. I got to figure out a way to keep from having to sign anything. So I go in there, and the guy says, okay, so what do you want to do? And I said, well, I want an airborne ranger contract. And he goes, well, I don't think we've got any of those. Let me check. He gets on the computer. He's like, yeah. But hey, I got something for you here. Hey, how does Korea sound? And I'm like, well, great, man. Like, they got airborne rangers in Korea? And he's like, no, man, I'm telling you, I don't have any airborne ranger contracts. And I'm like, okay. I don't know what to tell you then. I don't want Korea if there's no airborne rangers over there. And he goes, let me check. So he checks, and he goes, oh, I got it here. You're going to love this. He goes, how does Hawaii sound? Beaches, babes, and beer, right? And I'm like, yeah, man, sounds great. So there's an airborne ranger unit there. And he's like, look, I'm telling you, I got no airborne ranger contracts. So I said, hey, look, man, no worries. I'm waiting for my dad anyways. I'm going to give you some time to go figure it out, see if you can get something. I'm not signing anything if it doesn't say airborne ranger on it. And I'm going to have my dad review it. And he's like, well, who's your dad? And I said, well, he's a retired command sergeant major, but I don't know what the codes are, and I want to have him look it over before I sign it. Well, hey, if we go asking for an airborne ranger contract and we pull one, you're going to have to sign it. I'm like, yeah, I told you. I want an airborne ranger contract. That's what I want. And so my dad came in. I told him real quick, and he said, "What's your GT score?" Because he's thinking they got to be trying to like make me like a cook or something because my GT score is real low, right? So I tell him what my GT score was, and he's like, "Well, damn, you could do whatever you want in the Army with that GT score." Well, luckily for us, my dad knew a guy that was working there. They saw each other right away, bro hugs, and what brings you in here? Talking to my dad, he's like, "Well, my son's trying to sign up, and it looks like you guys are trying to play some games with him." But he did it much more colorful than that, right? I just don't want to, for the audience, I don't want to share too much, right?
Yeah.
But anyway, so my dad, so they start talking, and then we walk into the other room, and lo and behold, as we walk into the other room, the phone rings, ironically enough. And to this day, I believe that another recruiter called that number and then said, "Hey, yeah, oh, okay, so we got it? All right, we'll check the system. Hey, yep, here it is. Here's your Airborne Ranger contract." So I got my Airborne Ranger contract. I got in. I went through basic at Benning, went to airborne school, and you and I talked earlier, and I'll share that with everybody. Like, of all my military training, the sawdust pit and the PLF areas was, because I went in July, so you're sweating already, it's hot, and now you're in the sawdust pit, and it was miserable for me. And I remember thinking, like you, like airborne school was like the most challenging school, only because of that damn sawdust pit. And I think those instructors actually enjoyed slamming you into the ground, So I did that and went to 3rd Battalion. Well, I went to RIP, finished RIP, went to 3rd Battalion, 75th. And that was just before Gothic Serpent. The Somalia event, right? Now, I actually graduated RIP as they went to Texas to do the train up. And then, so I knew that something was going down, and there was some chatter, but it was just a train up, and sometimes those train ups don't materialize to anything. But then I got word that they went to Fort Bragg to do an additional train up, and that it looked like they're going to get deployment orders, right? And I was like, man, hey, I'll load magazines, I'll fill canteens, I'll do whatever it takes. Realize you may not want a new guy, but I'll do whatever it takes, right? Haynes, you ain't going anywhere. They don't want new guys. This is the real deal, and they're not training anybody. Everybody's already trained. And I'm like, timing's everything. So I missed that one, but ironically enough, which actually was worse than that, was my brother was in Alpha Company 375, and on the 4th of October, after the big gunfight, they deployed Alpha Company. And so now I'm sitting at Fort Benning. My twin brother is actually deployed for the first time. I'm not, and I'm the older one by 10 minutes, right? Yeah. So go ahead.
So now, did you guys? Well, so we'll unpack a couple of things here, because the first thing I want to talk about is you dealing with that recruiter, because I get a lot of phone calls, because one of the things I do here is, like, I'll try to mentor the younger generations that don't have access to their fathers, or their father has nothing about the military.
Yeah.
So I've sort of I'm somewhat, I guess, their military father, because they'll reach out to me and they'll tell me, hey, I'm getting ready to engage with this recruiter. Like, what do I do? And I tell them the same thing that you did, hey, like, have a list of everything that you want. Tell the recruiter, this is what you're looking for. And I told them, they're going to try to sway you to do something else.
Yeah.
However, you need to stick to your guns, because at the end of the day, when you sign that piece of paper, you're locked in for 3 to 6 years, right, and you're doing that job. You know what I mean? Right. Yeah. Recruiter's not doing it. So it speaks volume that you were able to do that at such, because you were how old when you joined?
So I was 22.
22?
Yeah, I was 22 when I joined.
Gotcha. Yeah. So even then, like, your guys at 22 are still somewhat influential, especially if they're looking at a military man.
Correct.
And he's telling them what to do.
And he's on his uniform. Mm-hmm. He looks at it. He's got a position of authority, because he is. And you're intimidated as a young person, right? I remember clearly thinking, like, if I don't get what I want, then I'm not going to be able to do the Army thing, right? And I would hate to do anything else.
Yeah.
But I always, because with a dad in the military, Like there is always options. Like if there's any one time you have control of your career, it's when you're talking to the recruiter. You just don't know it.
Yeah.
Because they need you. They're just not going to tell you that. Right? So especially right now with the numbers being down, like I would tell any young individual, one, there's a network out there. Reach out to a veteran. You just got to find a reliable veteran, right? One, that's got their shit together, right? Yeah. So, hey, if you get a first sergeant, a retired first sergeant, or retired sergeant major, retired command sergeant major, you're probably going to do all right.
Yeah.
I would throw in even the sergeant first classes because those guys have been successful in the Army if you retired as a sergeant first class. So, seek those people out. The network is out there, and and now there's all these wonderful things like LinkedIn and find those people, find the people who are doing the podcasts like yourself. I mean, if anybody would want to reach out to me, I would be more than happy to help them out. After I retired, I've talked with many individuals still in the military and some of the young guys that are looking at going in, and it fills my cup to be able to give back to them and kind of guide them in the right direction.
Yeah.
So I would say, man your guns, stick with it, right? If you don't want to do that job, don't do it. If you have a desire to do a specific thing, hey man, check it out. It's a cycle. Yeah. They may be out of, in that recruiting station, they may be out of those allocated MOS slots, but they can reach out to another station that may not have been able to fill theirs and pull it.
Yeah. Because I also look at it as also just good business with the military. Because if you have a guy that goes in the job that he wants to go in at, like, let him do that. Don't try to coerce him, because now you're creating a bitter soldier that's stuck in a job that he doesn't want to do, and he's just going to get out.
That's right.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, Jay, what happens is that, let's say the recruiters have, 100 mechanized slots, and they have 100 infantry slots and 100 airborne slots. I don't know if those numbers are realistic or not, but just for easy math and for everybody to kind of relate. Once they exhaust that 100 airborne slots, they're trying to fill those other allocated slots that there's their quota on.
Yeah.
That way they meet their mission, right? It's like a car salesman. He's going to try to sell you the cars that he has on the lot before he takes you and has you build one or lets you go to another dealership, right? So he's going to try, if you went in there looking for a four-door sedan, but he's sold out of those, or he's really low on those numbers and he's got to sell pickup trucks, he's going to lead you over to the pickup truck area and see if you bite on a pickup truck.
That makes sense.
Right. Yeah.
That makes perfect sense. And the second thing I have is, when you decided to join, or when you were having that conversation with your dad, like, how was he? Because it's something that I'm sure you've had to deal with, having kids yourself. And now I'm at the point, my son is 6, and you saw the front of the house, right? He's already planning on joining. And I'm like, man, as a father, you still feel some type of way, right? You want to keep your kids safe, but you also respect that they want to follow in your footstep and go do things for God and country. So I don't know if you remember how your dad felt, if he had any words of wisdom, if he was worried, if he was proud, like, and 30 somewhat years later, I'm not sure how many years you did, but how was he from a father's perspective?
Yeah. So I got to tell you, it's a big mixed bag, right? One, he was proud. He was actually there when, I took my oath, and that really made me proud. It made that moment very special, and I'll always hold that very dear in my heart, that when I took the oath to defend the Constitution for the first time, my dad was there with me, right? And as soon as it was over with, it was bro hugs, and I know there was a lot of pride there. My advice from my dad that I thought resonated really well, and I shared, and I continue to share this advice with other people, is regardless of what you do, when you wake up in the morning to shave, you need to look in the mirror and be happy with who you see in the mirror. Mm-hmm. And that needs to be your compass in life. And I always thought that was pretty profound when he told me that. Because as a young person, you're conflicted. I was. Do I stay in college and make my mom happy? Do I follow my own desires and my own wants? And, there's some risk involved, right? You know that if you're going to be an airborne ranger, if you're going to serve in special operations, you will deploy. You will get in a gunfight. And, not everybody comes back, as you and I both know, Jay, right? So because my dad was a Vietnam vet, right? He was a door gun. Well, he served a little bit with the infantry as an attachment on the ground, and then he served as a door gunner on a Huey. And, I could tell that it bothered him that his sons were going into the military and was going to follow something as crazy as being an airborne ranger. And he expressed to me at one point that he would rather sign back up than have his boys go to war, right? And I feel the same way when I look at my nephews and my nieces and they're talking about joining the military and the glory of, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to, experience the Army. I'm going to experience combat and I'm going to be different than everybody else. But the reality is when you look across the force after a war and after a couple of deployments, I don't even take a couple, it takes usually just one. You see how it becomes like people become unraveled or they, start to suffer from post-traumatic stress because it's a human nature, right? And Jay, I got to tell you, this is what I think everybody needs to understand. Mama taught you to be kind to people and not to hurt people. You go into the war, you get conditioned, or you go into the Army, you get conditioned, you get training to do those things that Mama said not to do. And when you do those things, you'll do it in defense of the Constitution, right? And no greater cause after 9/11 than to pick up arms and take it to the enemy, right? But psychologically, you know that what you're doing isn't what we should be doing with other people, right? And I think that's just an inherent conflict, right? And, when I see my nephews and my nieces kind of feeling gung-ho, like, I want to go do what my uncle and my brother did, or my father did. And I'm like, yeah, it's cool, man. Like, go do it. Just realize it's not as cool as you think it is, right? Yeah. So it's a little conflicted.
Yeah. And I think that's another thing that's very important about sharing, because even these new guys that I speak to nowadays, like they're so, because I used to tell my brand new SF guys, I was like, don't go chasing that dot. Don't go chasing that firefight, because when it shows up, you're going to regret it.
That's right.
You know what I mean? And some of these guys that are all about, I want to go do this, and that. I'm like, just know there's also consequences that comes with wanting to go SF, wanting to be a Green Beret, wanting to deploy, wanting to fight. It's not just all like rainbows. There's a bad side to this.
That's correct.
And it comes in the form of PTSD, suicide, divorce, and everything that you don't hear from that recruiter or from anybody.
That's correct.
Yeah.
Jay, I got to tell you, right, like when I look at the guys I've served with and when they first came in or when I first met them before the war kicked off or when they came out of the Q course while the war was going on and you saw them fresh, right? Barrel chested freedom fighter for sure, totally competent, totally capable, and there's nothing but great things ahead for this person, right? And then you throw in 20 years of war, some really good gunfights, and some hairy situations, and then you see the person dealing with PTS. You start seeing the person having interpersonal issues, family problems, and it's not because of the way the person was raised or because of the way the person was before he came into the military. And so it's tragic, but that is what it costs in defense of our Constitution, right? And our way of life. And so somebody has to make those sacrifices. Somebody has to be willing to do that. And there's guys like you and I, and luckily the gals are jumping in now too, but the reality is there's a lot of great Americans out there that are just continuing to pick up the baton and run with it. And, I really feel good about where our force is at. We just, got to keep, steering it straight and moving on.
Yeah, I agree 100%. And the more aware people are as far as what they're about to face, then the more they can prepare themselves for it.
That's right.
So, absolutely. Now, so is all you guys identical twin, you and your brother?
So my brother and I are identical twins.
Okay.
And when we were in the Ranger Regiment, because that's where we served together, literally there's a sidewalk that separated our two companies. Man, it was a field day. Like everybody mixed us up. And when the leaders mixed us up, they didn't feel good about it. I did a lot of push-ups because I was, they thought I was the other Haynes and Alpha Company, and I was actually the Haynes and Bravo Company.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So now, did you guys go to recruiting station, MEPS, and all that stuff together, or were you guys separated by like some time in between?
Yeah. So here's the deal. So we did 2 years in college. Henry jumped out early because he was doing a lot more horribly than I was. Mm-hmm. I finished up the semester, so I was about 3 months behind him. So he jumped in first. He got in there, and so when I started basic training, he was just finishing his basic training. And we were able to, we've had some really good opportunities throughout our careers to where we could link up, right? And the thing was, basic training was one. Going out to his barracks for the first time when I was in airborne school and spending some time in Ranger Regiment, in the compound, in the barracks, when I was just a nobody that just graduated basic training was pretty cool. And then during our training events, right, just being able to link up together on a flight line after the training event. And back then, the PX, whatever they had there locally, we'd had to get whatever we got, right? So we'd get some Swisher Sweets, cigars, all right, and we would smoke on the flight line. Of course, now we're smoking nicer cigars than Swisher Sweets, right? Yeah. But it was great, hey, so how did your training event go? What did you learn? Hey, what do you think's next? What you got going on next? It was some really good moments where we were able to share there on the flight line that, as things seem tough and as you're trying to get through, the daily challenges of, competing with all of your peers and meeting up the expectations of your leaders, it's just cool to be able to have those, and it's good memories.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I can only imagine just going through with assembling and the memories and the good times and the pranks and the joking around that.
A lot of those.
Yeah. I can only imagine. Now, if you had to give anybody advice as far as your time at Ranger Battalion, RIP, and just how to, I guess, succeed over there, what would that be? Because I would imagine, we're a couple of years removed, but I'm sure not a lot has changed.
Yeah. So here's what I would say is you have to be 100% committed. If you aren't 100% committed in the Ranger Regiment, you're not going to do well. Your physical fitness has to be at its peak. There is some conditioning, there's some, places where you can improve and get better. But when you come in to the Ranger Regiment, for all the young fellers and gals out there, I would just say, if you're not maxing your PT score, if you're not in a 290 in old school 290, 300, but if you're not at the top end of your ACFT, I don't even think you should try it. Right, because physical fitness, specifically cardio, whether it's Ranger Regiment or it's Special Forces selection, cardio. Mm-hmm. Right, because the better your heart is able to pump that blood and the faster you're able to recover, the quicker you're able to re-engage for the next event, the less mentally fatigued you are. That's one. The second thing is your mental fortitude, right? You will be challenged. You will have good leaders and you will have some bad leaders. Because even in a Ranger Regiment, youth makes really bad leaders sometimes because you don't know what you don't know. And so I would just say you have to be willing to stick it out. You have to have a lot of grit, and you have to know that being in a Ranger Regiment is bigger than just you serving in the Army, right? You're at a super elite unit. No one's going to be listening to excuses, and everybody just wants high performance. So if you're not engaged, man, this is not the place for you. There's some other places in the Army where you can serve really well, and not to speak badly, right? Like the 82nd, the 101st, the 173rd, like those are all really good airborne units that aren't at that level that the Ranger Regiment is, but you can really do a lot of good stuff and you can really contribute in defense of our Constitution. But that may be more of a place, right? If you're trying to figure out life, if you don't have a lot of internal discipline where you can commit yourself to the PT and doing all the extra things that you have to do to sustain those in those units, then you might as well just go ahead and pack your bags.
Yeah, that's actually really sound advice. Before we get back to your brother deploying, if you had to share one one thing or one hobby that your mom and dad did to prepare you and your brother to enter the military and succeed the way you guys have been able to, what would you say that is?
Jay, I would have to say that, because my dad was in the military and because my mom is German, there was a lot of structure in our house. Expectation that you're going to start something, that you're going to do it. And then, there was accolades and reassurance, and there was, this really just hyper, I'm trying to look for the word, just a hyper sense of accomplishment that they would share if you excelled at something. So, do task A, and if you did it really well, my mom and my dad made sure that, it was acknowledged.
Yeah, rewarded.
Right. Then I don't even know if it was rewarded because I don't think my parents really ever, we didn't get, what do you call it, when you give the money out to the kids when they're...
Chores or whatever? No,
when you get your weekly or monthly... Allowance.
Yeah.
Yeah. We never did those kinds of things, but it was just the pat on the back. It was the acknowledgement, you did that really, really well. There's good, that's really, really well done. And then there's for the things that we didn't do well at, they graciously let us know that that's not our cup of tea, right? And they didn't give the false bravado of, no, don't worry about it, it's good, it's a good game. Did you enjoy it? Did you have fun? The idea of did you have fun at doing something really, because I don't know if that's even in the German vernacular, right? Surely not in the sergeant major's or first sergeant's vernacular, right?
Yeah.
But I think it was just, here's the task, it's your day, do the task, and do it as best you can. And then that formulates into, if I love doing what I'm doing, then I should be pouring everything into it. And that's what being in special operations, in my opinion, is all about. If you're not pouring your whole heart and your whole soul into it, man.
What are you doing?
Yeah. It may not be the place for you.
You're just a liability at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's good to hear, because I'm military and my wife is German, so I feel sorry for my kids.
Well, and we say that, right? Because, this idea that you hold your children accountable for the things that they do really well, and you hold them accountable for the things that they don't do really well. There's a way to do that, right? And it's not to beat down, it's not to berate and belittle them. It's to basically go, hey, this is the direction in life you probably need to go because you do that really well. I didn't do well in school, and my parents had to be on top of us. My brother and I, let me tell you something, what you don't want to do is do math in public. But what you don't ever want to do is have Bill Haynes spell in public, right? And, I had some wonderful teachers. My parents were engaged, but it was that consistency, right? And I knew, hey, writing a book will never be in Bill Haynes' future. But there were some things I was really good at that I knew clearly because my parents were signaling this is your thing in life.
Yeah. And I think that's very important, especially to... everybody watching now, the youth, because if you don't fit, don't jam it in there. Just go find your path.
That's correct.
Some of us are just meant to be in the military. We're not all meant to be doctors and lawyers, and that's okay.
That's right.
What I mean?
And Jay, I got to tell you, right? So for my brother and I don't know. My assumption is, looking back at it, because I don't know if back in when I was going to elementary school, if they knew what ADD was, or you name your attention issue, right? And I would tell you, for me, it was a give a shit factor. I didn't care about school because I didn't see the value in some of the things they were teaching. And I think that's the problem the teachers have, is that you have to make it relatable to people that are go-getters, that are just, full of energy, right? Mm-hmm. And boys, in a lot of cases, they don't want to sit down at the desk like the girls do. And they don't want to be studious. I know I didn't want to be studious. I kept thinking about, hey, what's going to happen at recess, right? And what's going to happen after school, right? And how am I going to get my homework done fast enough that I can get out there and still play before the sun goes down, right? But that's that kind of that guy, that gal that, hey, you find it hard to pay attention in school. You're not a horrible person.
Yeah.
Like, there are a lot of jobs and a lot of occupations out there that require you to be outdoors and require you to be physical. And if that's your niche, go do those things.
That's
right?
Awesome advice.
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome advice. So now your brother deploys and you're back at Ranger Battalion. How are you feeling? Were you scared? Were you jealous? Like, what was going through your mind?
Well, of course, I'm worried. There's always that worry that now, we just got a whole bunch of dudes in a gunfight, and we were getting a word back that, it was not a good day. And they were deploying another whole company because basically Bravo Company was going to stand down. And I was like, man. So one, a little worried for my brother. But the thing is, when you're younger and you've grown up with somebody, you just know, like, hey, the dude's going to be switched on, right? And he's going to, like, bring the fight to him, right? And if he goes down, I know he's swacked a whole bunch more on the way down. So there's that part. Of course, I'm inside. I'm like, man, I'm starting my career out and I'm missing the boat. And I think a lot of our viewers today are going to be looking at it from the same perspective, right? Hey, 20 years of war and the war ends just as I get into the military, right? Or I didn't get my chance to deploy. Well, let me tell you something. If you stick around in special operations, you're going to do some things that are really cool. And based off our history, if you stay in 20 years, you're going to see something.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I would say, because I came in and I made it to SF in 1999. And the reality was some of that stuff from 99. Well, let's say that from 93 to 2001, there was a lot of good stuff going on that was really below the radar, that you didn't have Durloff to go straight to lethal means. And you had to, like, show escalation of force in Bosnia and Kosovo. And then, of course, there was also the Haiti thing that went down. Didn't go down, but everybody was launching for. But the reality is, those moments when you know that everybody thinks we're at peace, and you're going to surgically strike in and you're going to snatch people, or you're going to go and get in and take over a country, like that, in my opinion, that's actually cooler.
Oh, yeah.
Than, I'm going to go and, rinse and repeat Afghanistan, rinse and repeat Iraq, right? Or, name the conflict, right?
Yeah.
So, but what's really nice about those big wars is that you're part of one of the best things going for that generation. Right? Like, there's going to be, like, we look at the Vietnam War, right? There was the moon landing. And in that time frame, kind of like, if you look at that, we had the moon landing. It was Nixon impeachment, right? Well, not the impeachment, but he basically had to leave office. And there's the Vietnam War, right? And now some people would go, and there was Woodstock, right? And that's cool too, I guess, right? Depending on what spectrum you're on, right? But, there's a couple of things that happened in the 70s, 60s, and 70s where you're like, that's cool.
Yeah, and then global war and terrorism is ours.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And, and for some of the guys that were in between in the 80s and the 90s, and there was the Desert Storm, but, then we had Panama, we had Grenada, we had, all of these little things that happened. Bosnia, when we were out there hunting people down to make them stand for their, in front of a court for their war crimes, potential war crimes. And then a lot of cross-border type stuff where you're observing, nefarious actors and stuff, and you're slipping in very covertly. That's the cool stuff, right? I know we're fast-forwarding a little bit here, but when I first came in SF, you couldn't have beards, and even operationally, right, to have an operational grooming standard was unheard of, and you had to get paperwork. And if you didn't, someone was going to jerk you up. But when you got the clearance to do it, and you knew it was all legit, and you knew you had the paperwork in your pocket, and you basically, if anybody said, hey, what are you doing? Why do you have this thing going on your face? And you just go, here it is. Right. And then you knew you were legit. Right. And now, I get it. Right. Our recruiting posters, all that stuff. Right. Yeah. It is what it is.
Yeah. I don't like it. I think there should be standards, and I think SF, that's one of those standards. Like, hey, if you want a beard, you got to earn it. You know what I mean? Nowadays, I see random kids in the PX with beards. I'm like, what?
Well, I think it's Jay. I think it's dishonest from special operations recruiting, right, and the people who are messaging to sit there and say this is the image that we want in our organization, because that image is a fraction, is a slither of your career.
Yeah.
Right. The reality is the rest of it is the Army image.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, and this is just me, like when I was like throughout majority of my deployments, I never wore a beard because as the 18 Charlie, I spent more time with Big Army, you know, interacting and building relationship, getting things for the team. And I want them to be able to relate to me. I didn't want to be imposing or be threatening to them. So I was like, hey, the best way I can do this is by just looking like them. I'll shave my face and I go down there and hang out with them and build rapport. And it always worked out. It always worked out good for the team, you know?
The reality is professionalism will always speak volumes, right? And when you're in an environment where you need operational grooming standards, there's the right place for it. And everybody knows, and you look legit. And if they see you the next time in another setting and you look like the epitome of a professional soldier, it will only build your power base. And it will always allow you more maneuvering room in that operational space, because leaders do not want cowboys and they don't want cavalier, because what that does creates more work.
Yeah, I agree 100%. Yeah, it's coming. The comment section. Oh, leave it up to command sergeant majors and first. I'm going to talk about beards. It is what it is.
So now, you're right.
How was the rest of your time in Ranger Battalion, and how did you go about discovering Green Berets, and why did you choose that route over the fence over there? Just curious to hear about that.
So I did 3 years in Ranger Regiment. What I didn't particularly care about the Ranger Regiment was there was a lot of hooting and hollering, a lot of pressure. Right? It's almost as if you felt as a leader you had to motivate people to do better, to do more, to be on the top, in the tip of the spear. And what I liked about the image of SF was, hey man, you have to be self-motivated to come out here and do the selection. Prepare yourself, come out here and do the selection, and nobody's going to yell at you. Nobody's going to be hollering at you. Nobody's going to be low crawling you through the ditch. But what they will say is task, condition, and standard, execute. Right? Do the best you can. And it's all about you and whether or not you've got the ability. And then when you actually showed up to a team, what I liked was, you know, in my time in the Ranger Regiment, I was exposed to some of the SF guys, some of the SF teams as we were doing some training together. Laid back, relaxed, and then when it came time to do work, it was like you could see hyper-focused, and they were doing it. And there was nobody, you know, pushing them. Now, you have to do that in Ranger because you got privates. In SF, you don't, right? But that's what I was looking for at the time. You know, I made staff sergeant rather quickly, and I thought, hey, man, this is the way I want to go, because although the Ranger Regiment's great, I don't want to sit there and continue to have to yell at people to motivate them, counsel them, and do all those things on little things like, hey, man, don't bounce a check, right? Don't get into a fight. Don't drink and drive. You know, we do some of that in SF, right? But it's different, right? Because you're dealing with a different level of non-commissioned officer, right? And, you know, everybody knows, like, you do certain things. Like, I don't have to yell at you. Hey, man, Bill, you just messed up. And it's bad.
Yeah.
Yep, you're right. And I'm sorry, right? Like, anyways. So for me, that's what it was. I was looking for a more professional organization where I'm not being yelled at and I don't have to yell to get my point across. And I'm not saying you have to do that in Ranger Regiment. I just think at the time it was going on because we didn't have the combat stuff going on. And it's strange what the Army will focus on when you're not busy, not truly busy, right? Yeah. So.
And if you have privates, let's just be honest, you're gonna have to do some of this type of stuff.
That's correct.
You know,
that's correct.
Not all privates are created equal.
Absolutely, and I think that's one of the things, right? Like, that's the reason why I didn't want to go to conventional armies, because I know there's more of that, right? And there's more knuckleheads, and I knew that in Ranger Regiment, you got privates, and there are just some knuckleheads, right? Not horrible. You got to deal with that as a leader. But for me, it was, no, I want to be around NCOs, a team of NCOs. Everybody knows their lane. Everybody has their focus. And it's more laid back. And then when it's time to perform, now the intensity goes up to 100, you know. And then once that training event's over, or once that deployment's over with, it goes back down and everybody can act like humans again.
Yeah, that's
right?
awesome. That's awesome. So now you went to selection. Did you and your brother talk about, did he ended up going that route also, or did he
So
stay?
he asked me. So, man, and I don't want this to go off the wrong way, but so I went to my first team. I went to 110 over in Stuttgart, Germany. And I came to an old team, right? When I say old team, back then, you know, we had guys on the team, E7s with almost 20 years in the Army.
Oh, wow.
Right? And, you know, team sergeants with, if you were lucky, he made it just before 20, or he was right in the 20 mark, or maybe even beyond 20 years in the Army. Mm-hmm. So you had a lot of real senior dudes. Dudes have been around the block a while, dudes with some injuries, dudes, you know, that just, they were tired. Mm-hmm. And being a young Ranger, like, I was like oil and water, man. I wanted to get out and train. I wanted to deploy, and I wanted to show everybody that we had the best team. And so I had a lot of youthful exuberance. I realized that. And I had some really good team sergeants that really helped kind of, even though I wanted to be in a world with a whole bunch of professionals not yelling, it's just hard to take that out of you when you've been at it for 4 years, right? So I needed some coaching and some mentoring with regards to that to get me where I wanted to be. But my first team sergeant and my first team was a challenge. So when my brother asked me, he goes, Bill, I'm thinking about going to selection. What do you think? And I'm like, man, bro, I'm just going to tell you, I'm not happy. I was on the ledge, Jay, a couple of times where I almost like wanted to withdraw and go, hey, man, I'll terminate status and I'll go back to the infantry and just do needs of the Army, because I was that miserable for about 6 to 9 months. And here's what happened. I got a new team sergeant. We went from a team that wasn't deploying, that got piecemealed whenever we'd go do something, to rock stars. And only one person changed.
Yeah. And that goes to tell you, because I always preach, and you can attest to this, that team sergeant position, like, he is Mike Tyson. Like, he is the guy in the team room.
That's correct. And that team sergeant job, the best job in SF, hands down, in my opinion, and it is the hardest job.
Oh, yeah.
To include my first sergeant time, my sergeant major time, my CSM time. That team, because you've got it coming from all ends, right? You feel the pressure from your company leadership. Mm-hmm. You feel the pressure from your team, from your guys, because they're all holding you accountable. And the sense of not wanting to fail and not wanting to fail them, and them being your guys on the team and your leaders, and how do you bring those two things together? Man, that is a art that, you know, as you know, Jay, not a lot of team sergeants are meant for it, right? There's some of them that just, they fail. Yeah. But then there's some that do really well. Yep. And that's magical, right? So that second team sergeant I had was absolutely magical. And I'm going to say his name because I don't think he would mind, because he's retired, obviously. He's been retired for a while. Dave Connor. Dave Connor, man, he was phenomenal. Yeah. And he was the right team sergeant for me at the time in my life, where he wasn't crushing me. He would actually listen to me. And then he'd go, okay, I heard what you said, Bill, and I don't agree, we're doing this. Yeah. But that's what I needed to hear. I didn't need to get the, hey, man, you're too much to handle, or hey, you're too intense, or hey, I got time for you. Right? I needed to, hey, I'm a staff sergeant in the United States Army. I've been around a while. I want you to at least acknowledge that I had this conversation with you. And he was really good at that. Yeah. So my advice to any of the team sergeants is, listen to your heretics, listen to the people that are your pain in the asses, because you might learn something, but then just let them know, like, I'll listen to you, but once I make a decision, it's final. Yeah. And I like that, because it speaks to leadership, because we both know that the type of guys that show up to our team room, you got to be a strong leader to lead them. You can't just toss them off to the side and ignore them. That's not going to work. That's right.
Yeah.
Those wet noodle team sergeants, I call them wet noodles because they kind of just bend and they're kind of like Gumby, and they think that's the right way of leading. But the reality is, when you're around a whole bunch of real, truly apex meat eaters, like that, one, you got to listen to them because they will have good ideas and they will execute at a phenomenal level. But if you don't listen to them, and then if you don't make a decision, they will eat you up.
Oh yeah, they're gonna eat you up, and next thing you know, you're on the outside looking in. Your shit's packing up outside because you had a freaking revolt on your hands. Now we'll back up just a little bit. Then we'll talk about your SF career. Selection in the Q course. How was that for you, and what advice would you give to anybody? Because again, even though the phases have moved around and reorganized, in my opinion, it still takes the same type of person.
That's right. One, I would just say, for me, right, I would say you have to be in phenomenal physical shape. If you think you're going to show up to selection meeting minimum standards, you're going to be exhausted. Mentally, you're not going to be there when you're having mental aptitude type tests, when you're being evaluated on how well you make decisions and what you say, right? Because when you become fatigued, your guards start going down, right? And your filters are working less. So the more physical shape you are, and I go back to the cardio, I was a running fool back in the day. And I would run long distances. I would ruck my ass off. And if you ain't running and if you're not rucking, and then I would add in some pull-ups, right? If you're not able to do no shit, a minimum of 6 dead hangs. I would say, 10 to 12 is where you want to be at, right? But the runs, you have to be cardiovascularly fit because you'll be mentally switched on. You'll be more attentive of what's being put out. You'll be more attentive what's going on with your team. And the realities for me was selection, although it was tough, it didn't like break it off in me. I wasn't like ever like at a point where I'm thinking I might not make it today. And then as I look through and I think back through my my selection team that I had, like who was the guy that was rewrapping and frapping the apparatus? It was me, because most of the guys were under the tree taking their break when the instructor said take a break. But I was actually in there rewrapping and frapping to make sure that whenever the break was up, we'd be able to keep going. Mm-hmm. But that was only because, and I would say, thank God to Ranger Regiment, because you were running and rucking your ass off in Ranger Regiment, and that's what it took. Now, a lot of guys and the gals are going to the gym because of CrossFit, this, that, and the other, and that's good stuff, right? But the fundamental is you're going to be running and rucking at selection.
Yep.
Right? And you don't want to get an overuse injury, but you got to build up slowly and you got to get with it and you got to continue challenging yourself. Mm-hmm. It's short runs, fast, long runs, slow, but just get after it, right? And same with the rucks, right? You can do fast rucks. You can do slow rucks, but usually it's associated with distance.
Yeah.
But if you think you're just going to, do what your unit, if you're coming from the big army, is doing, and that's going to get you in shape for selection, you're going to probably have to come back.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah. And I tell guys this all the time because this mentoring that I'm doing, I love it, but, I find myself getting, frustrated at times because guys will call me and ask me the most random questions. How do I prep for selection? I'm like, okay, what are you going to be doing at selections? Run, ruck, pull-ups, push-ups. Then just do those.
That's correct.
Like, you don't need some ridiculous training program. When we went through, there was no, all these different companies that are making. I was like, no, dude, I knew I was going to ruck. I knew I was going to run. I knew I was going to do push-ups, sit-ups, run. So I just went out and I did those things. That's the answer key. I just practiced those to the point where I felt comfortable enough to say, I've got this. And I went and I crushed it. Like, do the same thing.
When you know that you're maxing and you're going on the extended scale for the PT test, that's where you should be at before you come to selection.
Yeah.
And if you're not, and if you're just kind of rolling the dice, well, you're a roll the dice kind of person, and that's probably not what we want.
Yeah. Cadre's going to see
special operations, right?
Yeah. Cadre's going to see right through it. Now, do you remember where you were 9/11?
Oh, yeah. So I was in Stuttgart, Germany, and of course, time difference, right? It was first thing in the morning. We had done PT. We'd gone into the chow hall, and it was all over the TV screens in the chow hall there at Panzerkaserne. And I remember thinking to myself, because if you remember right, we had a bombing event in Oklahoma City a couple years prior when I was in Ranger Regiment, and I remember where I was at when I found out about that too. And I remember thinking that was domestic for the Oklahoma City bombing. But I thought, man, that's Oklahoma City is kind of in the center, really geographically, of the United States. That could be a really good kind of like way for a terrorist to say, hey, I got you right in the heart, right in the center, right? But that seemed more domestic to me. When you saw the planes going in, there's a lot of confusion, but I remember thinking to myself, that's a deliberate attack. We're going to be getting after it here pretty soon. So, yeah, it was pretty profound.
Yeah. Now, were you ready for what was to come? And was your brother, did your brother do 30 plus years, or did he get out?
Yeah, so my brother, interestingly enough, my brother went from Ranger Regiment and Alpha Company to RRD, Regimental Reconnaissance Detachment. He did his time there, and then because of Abrams' charter and because the previous leaders that made it far went out and done things like drill sergeant duty, he went out and did drill sergeant. Of course, my dad had done drill sergeant too.
Nice.
It is one of the courses, one of the schools I never went to because I couldn't as an 18 Delta that I wish I would have been able to do in the Army. But so he went and did drill sergeant, and then when he tried to come back in, it was after the war had started, and they kind of locked down the regiment for the most part, right? They had their dudes, and they were very focused, and their idea was, hey, we'll keep as many dudes, which retrospectively now that's kind of a bad recipe, right? Because you're just going to burn dudes out. But then he went to the 82nd and he deployed with the 82nd, and I'll tell you, man, he's got some great stories of being in the 82nd and those deployments early on. And then after his time in 82nd, well, we both tried Delta selection a couple times, right? Well, he did twice, but he then made his way back to RD. He got in there, and then he finished up his time after RD as a first sergeant. He got out of 20.
Nice.
Because here's the thing. The reality is when you look at SF and Rangers, and my brother was seeing all the bonuses I was getting, all the specialty pays, and at the time, Ranger Regiment wasn't paying a lot, right? And, when my brother had those conversations with some of the officers in the organization, like, hey, y'all realize that everybody else in special operations is getting all these specialty pays, but we're really not. But we're doing a lot, and you're all talking about how we're at the tip of the spear and how we're, doing this, that, and the other. But you're saying, hey, God and country, but nowhere else in special operations is that happening, right? So I'm going to take care of me and mine. I need to make money for my family to do well. So he decided after 20 just to go ahead and get out. Yeah. Now he's doing great stuff, and he went out to he went out to the commercial side, and and because the reality is that the Army is great, serving and being intrinsic, as the Sergeant Major of the Army was talking about on one of his podcasts. That's all really wonderful until you got to give your family opportunities, right? And when you see your classmates in high school, in college, when you see your other buddies that leave the military do really well, because we apply ourselves and we thrive on perfection. Companies love that shit, and then you just start making it higher and higher up in the organizational chart.
Yeah.
Right, and I mean, Ranger Regiment serving there is great, but if you can't provide for your family, you will have to make tough decisions sometimes.
I agree.
Right, especially if you're talented.
Oh yeah.
Yep.
Oh yeah. So now, how was the rest of you? Now, did you spend your entire SF career at 10th Group, or did you go back and forth to any of the other groups?
Yeah, so I was fortunate, right? So my career path was this. I did 5 years at 110. I did some time in a regular ODA, and then I went to the SIF at the time. Then once I was done with the SIF, then 5 years in Germany, I went to SWTG and taught at Range 37 at Sephardic. And then I went back to 110 because, hot tip, if anybody volunteers for 1-1 or 110, you're going to get it. More than likely, unless you're a Bravo, right? And then once I was done with that, then I did another almost 5 years there. And then I went to 10th Maine at Fort Carson. So in total, I did 20 years at 10th Group. And then because I made CSM, I had to go to 7th Group. I went and did 2 years as battalion CSM there. And then I went and did my final 2 years at, yeah.
Nice. Pretty, so in total, how many years?
So I did 30 plus. By the time I did my transition and then finally got out, it was just under 31. Yeah.
What made you love the military so much to where you gave it 30?
Well, I got to tell you, for me, it was the Sergeant Major mentioned, right? Sergeant Major Weimer, Sergeant Major of the Army, said there's an intrinsic desire to serve. For me, it was that intrinsic desire. It's what I felt so passionate about, and I think at an early age when I saw my dad doing things and serving, and for me it just resonated as a little kid, protecting America, protecting women and children, and being kind of like that beacon of freedom. It just resonated with me when I saw the SF guys there at Bad Tolz, Germany. It just resonated with me, right? That whole idea of, doing things that other people aren't aware of and being a part of something at the very beginning before it even becomes a bubble on the news channel. To me, it was just, that was the thing, right? And then the idea of being around a whole bunch of elite people who are perfectionists, who are driven to the nth degree to make a mission happen, like that just fueled my fire, right? And that's what I wanted to be a part of. And then as I started to move up, I got away from the tactical stuff and started going into that, that leadership spectrum. And that's a little bit of a juggle, right? Because you struggle with that. And I think a lot of times people will criticize leaders because they're being too political or because they have lost touch with reality. Mm-hmm. And you as a leader have to you struggle and you always fight with your time allotment. Do I go to meetings or do I go see soldiers? Do I go do these things or do I engage and have meaningful relationships with those soldiers I should be representing? There's a good balance in there somewhere. I think there's a lot of leaders that get it right and there's some leaders that get it wrong. But I do think that inherently leaders in special operations are good people trying to make good decisions, and they're allocating their times where they see the priority.
Yeah.
So, when I see in the past where there was criticism of certain leaders, usually it's general officers or it may be a high-level CSM, I'm usually pretty graceful for those people because, I have never come across a special operations leader that said, watch this, I'm gonna implode this place, right? They're always giving it everything they've got.
Yeah.
They're trying to make the best decisions. It's just, I may not agree with them. Now, here's the thing. What I loved about Special Forces and the Ranger Regiment is if I felt like we were off track and I needed to do a compass check with a leader, I knew I could always go into an office of a commander mm-hmm. and go, sir, I don't understand it. Sergeant Major, First Sergeant, I don't understand. Now, I'm not saying I ever did do that with the First Sergeant because that takes some cojones, right? But hey, I don't understand this. Like, why am I missing this? I don't see the point you're trying to make here or the direction we're going. Clarify. Yeah. Usually, and I'm talking about this mainly in Special Forces, right? Where I felt like I had a personal relationship with a commander and they valued my opinion and they would explain. And I've done that a couple times and it brings me down and it goes, okay, now I see it. I didn't get it because I didn't have all of the context. Right, and when they put it in context, you're like, okay, I can see where you're at.
Yeah,
I still may not 100% agree with you, but at least see your point.
Yeah,
right.
And I can honestly say, like, you were one of those leaders that cared about the dudes, and I'm not just saying that because you're sitting here. Because if you weren't, you wouldn't be sitting here. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because I can recall back to one specific incident where we had a guy from 10th Group. He was in the course and he was having some issues at home where there was guns involved. His wife was involved. And I remember we pulled him out of training and we went to your office. He was with me, CSM I'm not gonna say his name, but 6th Battalion CSM was there at the time also, and we sat down and we, spoke to the soldier and we laid out a plan to make sure that he was taken care of, whether it was, me, spending the night with him at a hotel, or him staying at one other instructor's house to make sure that he had oversight to where he wasn't going to go off and do anything dumb.
That's correct.
But we made sure that he was taken care of.
That's right. And the thing is, what people don't realize is, after a first sergeant has a full day, right? We're talking, from 5 to like 7 o'clock at night, right? And he's now thinking about, well, I have to get home because I know the wife is already starting to cook food for dinner. And then you get popped up on something like this, a situation where somebody needs more of your time. Your family will never get that, right? And the unit will expect it of you, and the soldiers will always be grateful for it. But that's the return. It's a zero-sum game for that leader because he just burnt bridges with his family.
Yeah.
He gained credibility with the organization, and clearly with the soldier, because if the soldier feels like he's being supported, it's a win. But that's the reason why those jobs are so tough.
Yeah.
Because they wear on leaders and they wear on the family. Because I remember plenty of times as a leader thinking, okay, I can't speak because I can't get a ticket. I don't want to get a ticket. But I need to get home because I just spent a last 2 or 3 hours taking care of a soldier.
Yeah.
And that's the part where that's where I found as a leader kind of like my why statement. If I could take care of soldiers in need, and if I could help push the shiny nickels or the guys that are up and comings in the right direction, so you're kind of stewarding those, taking care of the others, and there's that middle gap, like how do you still impact those individuals there? That for me, as a leader, that's what was gold for me.
Yeah.
Now, of course, the wife, and the family was like, you still ain't home? What's going on, right? So, but yeah, that's the way it is. That's Army life.
Yeah. So now you did 30 plus years, and now you're getting ready to retire. How did you deal with because I know when I made the call to get out at 20, there was still it took me a while to make that call. And then I finally had to prioritize the family and the little kids and then made that hard decision. How was that for you, transitioning, knowing that, hey, you've been, institutionalized for 30 plus years doing this job, and now you're about to embark on a whole new world? Like, how did you deal with that?
Yeah, I heard guys talk about how tough it is and how you hit a wall. I don't know if I per se hit a wall. I know that there's definitely a change in your battle rhythm in your life. For me, it's the adjustment between my wife and I, right? Me being around at the house more, well, all the time now compared to before where she had plenty of time on her own.
Yeah.
And she really appreciated that time on her own. For me, I realize that the Army will always continue moving on. For me, I saw through the lens of my father, my brother, and other people that I've served with that got out that, the Army continues moving on. And if you think you're the person that's the glue that holds it all together, you're sadly mistaken. And for me, I was ready for the transition because after 30 years, it's like, man, I gave it a good run. And I was just happy that I was able to serve and see the war come to an end. Because I wanted to be a part of the end. I wanted the enemy to know that there were Americans that would outlast them. That your commitment isn't greater than mine, because I would still be bringing the wood to you.
Yeah.
If we were still at war, right? And if you come back for some more, because the first go around, that first round you didn't get enough, I'm happy, and I'm sure there's plenty of other Americans that'll be right behind me that go, let's pick up the bats, and I'm gonna put the wood back to you again. And the second time it's gonna be harder. So for me, it was good, right? And I knew that it was time for me to go. So my exit was pretty smooth, except for that transition and reestablishing my own battle rhythm, my own purpose, my own sense of direction. My identity, although I always identified as a kid as wanting to be in the military, I realized that my identity of coming out, like I was looking forward to having a civilian identity and doing something different, and that the Army didn't define me, even though I like being defined as in the Army. That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's just, it may still come. I don't know. I know there were times when I thought, chain of command, no one's calling me while I'm in the retirement mode. Yeah, that's because they don't have time, right? They're worried about the mission and they're doing all the other things. Their grace that they're demonstrating is to give you time to prepare for separation. And I was grateful for that, right? But I did realize that when I heard these things from other soldiers when they were processing out and they felt like they were disconnected, I'm like, yeah, I could feel that too. But I think because of the different leadership positions, I was like, yeah, I mean, that's the nature of the beast, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's why they got reunions, and that's why you get together with your buds and schedule things and feel connected again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I agree 100%. So now, beyond the beret aspect of it, what do you have going on? I know you mentioned you're working on a foundation.
Yeah.
Please share what you got going on
Yeah.
in order to help the regiment.
Jay, I appreciate you asking that.
Sure.
So myself and Jamie Aguirre and Nolly Pearson, we have pulled together the SOG Foundation, Special Operations Genesis Foundation. When I served last in SWTG, I realized there's a little bit of a gap in the way our SWTG personnel are supported compared to the way our operational soldiers are supported in the groups. I found it a little more challenging to get relief for some of the things that we were experiencing with our soldiers. And so I wanted to get after that. I wanted to give back to SWTG, give back to the people that I think are probably the most deserving at this point for some relief. And here's what we got going on in SWTG for our viewers. You do 3 to 5 years on a team, you get rode really hard, you get signed to SWTG, and you got less resources, right? So your counselors are a lot less, your physical therapists are a lot less because they're spread thin across the permanent party and our students, because we want to keep our graduation rates up and give them every opportunity to succeed. So we got less resources, and then of course, like a lot of places, SWTG is undermanned, and leaders, their time is critical, right? And how they spend their time in their day. So I wanted to help out and create this foundation. So the foundation is really there to support the first 24 hours for the first 2 weeks of a crisis for a soldier, cadre member, or their family. And then in that time from notification, when I find out about it, then I'm connecting whatever crisis they're dealing with, the right, larger, benevolent organization that can create a long-term solution plan for them. So that's kind of the niche there. We've got 9 lines of effort. Basically, it's just 9 things that we're trying to get after. We've partnered with the Special Forces Scholarship Fund to, for the first time, we've opened up SWTG as a competitor for the scholarship, so you don't have to compete from the group of origin, and now you're kind of disconnected, so the leaders may not remember you, or at least you feel that way if you don't get the scholarship. So this way we're able to give scholarships to the cadre and their families assigned to SWTG, and we're going to look at continuing that. I've got, again, Jamie Aguirre, who is phenomenal. So all the social media posts, all the products that we're pushing out, she's the creator of those things, and she's doing a phenomenal. I think they look great. Yeah. And so she's doing a phenomenal job with that. We've done a lot of engagements with the nonprofit elements because I want to work by, with, and through the entire benevolent space within special operations, because I realize that if we're going to support SWTG as big as it is, right? Right now we're looking at cadre and their families, right? So Green Beret cadre and their families, PSYOPs cadre, and civil affair cadres and their families. So that's why we, instead of saying Special Forces Genesis, we said Special Operations Genesis, because we're going to support all of the cadre. One of the things I felt kind of bad about when I was a leader is that if we had a civil affairs or a PSYOP soldier that had problems, I couldn't really do anything more than give them an Army solution. Mm-hmm. Army solutions are great, but they're not perfect. And when I had a paratrooper die because he got ran over while he was in Florida, and I wasn't able to do anything for him because he was a logistician and not a Green Beret, as a leader, I fundamentally felt bad. I felt like inept. And I thought, well, if we're all a team and we're only taking care of what we consider to be the quarterback of the team, but we're not taking care of the entire team, that's a problem.
Yeah.
So we created that. So what we see right now is cadre and family in all 3 tribes. We're going to expand that then once we get big enough. We're going to expand that to permanent party. So that'll take care of, the paratroopers that are assigned to SWTG, right? And then from there, we're going to go into the students that are going through to show them that, hey, from the very beginning, we're going to take care of you. So if you have a crisis going on, we can help you out. And then ultimately, the alumni. If you served at SWTG, if you've ever served at SWTG, and you need something that falls in one of the categories of the 9 line that we're supporting, then we're going to help you out.
Now, when you say crisis, like, can you because crisis can span from, hey, we're getting a divorce, or hey, this dude is beating his wife, or hey, somebody passed away. Is there like a spectrum? Like what? Because I just want guys to know, or girls that are watching, like what crisis mean, just in case they're going through something, they feel comfortable reaching out.
Correct. So we've got a way that they can go to the website, SOG or SpecialOperationsGenesis.org, and there's a link that you can click on that allows you to say, hey, this is what I need, right? Or this is what the issue is. So it's everything from substance abuse to behavior, mental behavior, psychological behavior, or anger management, death in the family, any other extenuating circumstances where, hey, if it's disrupting you as a soldier and you're not able to focus in on your mission, if your family isn't 100%, hey, come to us, because I'm going to connect you to the right place, the right organization. We're going to take care of you initially, but then we're going to connect you to the right people, and you're going to go on autopilot at that point, right? Now, I will always encourage soldiers, as a sergeant major, as a leader within special operations, I always valued people who came to tell me, right, hey, like, this is what I got going on in my life. Because that first sergeant, let's say it's the team sergeant, the first sergeant, the sergeant majors, manage your schedule. And if we know something's going on, then we can always give you the time to take care of it. Yep. If it's affordable, if we can do it. And the reality is, most of the time, we're going to find a way to make it happen. So I would always encourage people to always engage their leaders. However, you can always come to us. We'll help you out as much as we can, and then we'll connect you to the right people.
Now, are you guys donation-based also?
We are.
Okay.
So right now, I've got the website isn't connected right now to a donation page. We have it up, but I'm working through the bank account right now. We are a subsidiary of the Special Forces Foundation. Ignacio Garza, who started the Special Forces Foundation, he and I served together at 10th Group. As I was working on my transition, he and I talked, loved the concept, and so with me not having to come out of pocket right away for all of the things, because it's expensive to start up a nonprofit, the Special Forces Foundation is helping us out with that. And then once we're up and running, then we'll continue to collaborate and do our things, but I'm going to always be grateful for the big assist from the Special Forces Foundation. So they can reach out to us regardless. People have my phone number in SWTG. There's the website. There are contacts out there. They can always contact me. I will get them in the right direction.
Yep. And what we'll do is we'll put the website in the description down below. Any emails you might have, I'll also put that down there in case people want to donate once you guys are up and running. Yep. And also if they have any issues, they know, hey, there's stuff out there for them to use. Because I think that's one thing that I know when I was at SWTG, we were getting better at the messaging as far as, hey, there's a bunch of organizations out there that supports the United States soldier, Marine, Airman. It's just a matter of getting the word out so everyone at the highest level know, like, hey, these items are available to you. Like, if you need the help, like,
that's correct.
These organizations are there to help.
That's correct. We're tied in with some counselors, and what I'm trying to do within the SOG Foundation is tie in with the lane within SWTG to get leader buy-in. So, for instance, we had 2 counselors, if you will, separate organizations. One didn't kind of pass the sniff test, because when I went to the unit psychologist, I said, hey, look, I just need a sanity check, right? Because I don't want to do anything with our families that isn't solid and sound, right? If I'm going to tie my name and my organization to it, I want to make sure that they're on the up and up. So the first one didn't pass the sniff test, but the second one, home run, right? And by, with, and through SWTG leaders, we're going to make sure that we tie our families and our soldiers to resources that are proven to be right. So, Jay, if I could real quick,
sure.
We talked about marriage, and we talked about how do you sustain a marriage within special operations, specifically SF, and I'd like to hit that real quick if we got time for that.
Of course.
Yeah. So, the conversation was, hey, what do you think allowed me to survive 20 years of marriage to the same woman in special operations? And I would tell you that I don't know if it's the right recipe, but it worked for me. When I came back from a deployment, I as much as I prepared for a deployment and I focused on that deployment, I did the deployment and I was focused on that deployment, that when I came back, I switched it all off as much as I possibly could. Now, my wife will probably tell you I didn't do it enough, right? But I switched it off as much as I could, and then I focused as much energy as I did operationally in preparing for the mission and being on the mission as with being with my family, right? And that doesn't mean how much money I spent doing a vacation or whatever. It really meant truly unplugging as much as you possibly can, being engaged in the planning process of that vacation as much as you can, and then being in the moment, right? Because families, wives and their kids all want you to be successful as a soldier, right? I say wives. Now it's husbands too, but your spouse and your family want you to be successful. So they're going to get behind you. Mm-hmm. They're going to empower you to say, hey, look, no, you just take care of you. You do what you got to do, because they know how important it is to you. And you go out and do your thing, and then you come back, and if it's just rinse and repeat, and it's just all about you, and it's all about the Army, and it's all about the mission, they never get their batteries recharged. And so you have to figure out a way and how you're going to recharge your family's batteries so they can do it again. But you got to pour back into them.
Yeah, and I think that's important because, again, realization goes a long way, because the stigma does exist, but that doesn't have to be the norm, right? It's, your family's there, your kids are there. They do want you to be successful, but you as the Green Beret or whoever, you have to realize that you have to prioritize them once you're home. You can't just expect them to be there and not do the work.
That's correct.
You have to do the work.
Jay, I got to tell you, right? So I remember there's a lot of guys in the team room that talk about, hey, I'm just going to go home and I'm just going to like chill out and I'm going to decompress. I mean, okay, if that's what you have to do, right? I get it. But for me, I worked at work. I worked on the deployment, and when I came home, it's work.
Yeah, you work on the marriage.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And if you think you're on vacation when you get back, well, you're probably going to miss the boat.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the wives are going to, and your spouse is going to get fatigued, and your spouse more than likely is going to say, I'm doing it all myself anyways. Why not just restart? Because I'm already doing it all my own. I can find somebody else to do it with me.
Yeah. And I think that's important, because I try to tell these guys, like, it's not because of the job. It's not because you're a Green Beret or because you're a special. That's not the reason why you're getting divorced. Because your wife, she knew what she was getting herself into. She knows what the job is. However, when you go home, or when you have the opportunity to go home, you need to work on that marriage.
That's correct.
And get it to where it needs to be, because it's not going to happen by chance. You have to do the work.
That's right.
And I only know this after my first divorce. So I'm speaking from experience, right?
Yeah, and Jay, I got to tell you, right, like to have that perspective and have the guys and gals hear that, it's monumental, right? For me, I've only been married to one. I got married after I became a Green Beret, and I was pretty explicit to her that this is me, this is who I am. I can't change that. And she was graceful enough to say, "Okay, I'm on board." But I was wise enough, and I don't know if it was. I'm surely it was by accident. It's not because I'm a brilliant guy in the matters of marriage when I just got married, because that's not the case.
Yeah.
But I just knew that, one, I wanted to be with her at the time. I wanted to recharge my batteries, but I also wanted to make sure that she's in it for the long haul. Yeah. So I had to pour back into her.
Yeah. So yeah, that's an awesome way to put it. So keep in mind, guys, if you want the grass greener on that side, you do have to water it. So we'll transition into leadership, and then we'll wrap this up. Now, you've served at all the different levels that I could think of. When it comes to leadership, what is your leadership philosophy?
Oh, you know what? I don't know if I've got a leadership philosophy per se, but what I will say is it is about the people, right? And when you're a first sergeant, when you're a sergeant major, understanding that you are the voice of those soldiers that are under you, and that you have to be listening to them, you have to have the purposeful engagements to garnish that insight of what they're feeling and what they're struggling with and where they need their help, right? And where we're as leaders a little off mark, right? And then also being that sounding board for that commander and giving that wisdom to the commander on how that person is interpreting, how that leader is interpreting the mission and the way to get to after the mission, how it's going to impact the guys and gals under you, right? And so I think as a senior NCO, that's paramount, right? Understanding, because I think that's what happens a lot of times with these senior leaders is that they lose the focus that they're down there to talk to the guys and gals and lobby for them and make sure that their voices are being heard. Because it's hard to have those conversations with the commander when you're saying, "Hey, boss, this is the impact," because they don't want a negative impact. No. They surely don't think that they're having a negative impact, but they need to hear when they're having a negative impact, right? I think that as a up and coming leader, right? And so when I think about my time as a young ranger, right? Youthfulness and lack of experience, lack of leadership can make you a certain kind of a leader that isn't beneficial for subordinates. When I think about my time in Ranger Regiment, the hazing, the harassment, and I got wrapped up in it, it's counterproductive to team performance. And I'd be a fool to think that it's no longer in Ranger Regiment. Surely it is. Surely there's parts in the Army where it's there. But if you're having to berate and belittle people and you're having to do these smoke sessions, like, you're not on a good path and you need to recalibrate, right? I think one of the things that I heard as a leader, and it was on my promotion board as a sergeant. I'm sorry, not my promotion board. I was bringing in a guy as a sponsor. And I'm in the room talking with the first sergeants in the CSM, and they said, "Well, would you want this person to lead your child?" Mm-hmm. And at the time, I was like, well, yeah, because I wanted the soldier to get promoted, right? I knew the right answer was yes. But and that's the reason why they ask those questions, right? Because you don't think about these things, right? But it really stuck with me because I kept thinking to myself, what's the wisdom in that? What's the thing, right? And as you're going through your development through the Army, I kept revisiting that, right? And then when I started started being a part of promotion boards, I started to reflect really deeply on that, right? Like, is this person in front of me that's wanting to get promoted? Is he somebody that I want, or is he or she somebody I'd want leading my child? Because in 20 years they may be, right? And so are we getting the right person? Because being technically and tactically proficient doesn't mean you're going to be a good leader. Do you take care of people? Because moms and dads want leaders to put a boot in their sons or their daughter's butt when they need it. But then they also need them to put their arm around them and pull them in and go, I still love you, right? I'm still going to take care of you. Just like we do with our children, right? And the people that are our neighbors and all the people around us. We do that. And when we just go, I'm going to discard you because it's just a boot in the butt and I'm just going to continue to grind down on you, that's a no-win.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So for me, it's that how do you promote the right people? How do you groom them to be the right leaders? And how do you continue to groom soldiers for that empathy to say, hey, the world's going to be imperfect. And as long as the mission didn't fail, it's going to be okay. Right? Reset, build your people up, continue to build them up. And if you got to tear them down, the tear down is separating them.
Yeah.
But you don't have to tear them down in the process of separating them, because there's a good way to release people. And I'm not saying I always got it right, because believe me, if I had $1 for every time I got leadership wrong, I'd be a pretty rich individual. But this is, after, reflecting after 30 years of experience, if you treat people with respect, most of the time you'll get the respect back. If you work on building a team, you're going to have a cohesive team that's going to take care of each other. But once you got one person in there riding down on people, it's a dog-eat-dog world, and everybody realizes it. And when that happens, nobody's looking after each other because everybody's looking after themselves. That's what you don't want in an organization.
Yeah, yeah. Some pretty powerful words, because as I'm sitting here listening, I'm like, man, all that makes sense, especially when it comes to, as a parent, would you want that person leading your kids? And
right.
I would almost say that to the current group of leaders we have in the military right now is those people that are under your watch, they are somebody's kids, so you need to treat them the right way, right?
That's correct.
Yeah.
And the thing is, when you talked about how did my dad feel about me joining the military, what I didn't share with you is my mom actually had a meltdown, right? She cried her ass off as soon as she found out I was joining the military. But when they do that, when they get behind their child going into the military, they're trusting those leaders to give them the swift kick in the butt, to train them, to embrace them, to empower them, to build them up, to continue, doing the things that the parents were doing in raising the child. But now it's the next level. Now, I will say, I think the Army does it better than a lot of businesses out there, because a lot of businesses are like, hey, I hired you, do your job.
Yeah.
Right? There's some input in development and this, that, and the other. But on the personal aspect, as as a first sergeant, like, how do you balance your checkbook? If you didn't get it, let me help you out. Hey, let me give you some personal growth things. This is the reason why you're not resonating well with your peers.
Yeah.
Right? And this is the reason why you're struggling right now. Let's talk about this and let me help you out in understanding. And there's a lot of time leaders put into subordinates that you don't get anywhere else in the corporate world.
Yeah.
Right? You might get it once you get some mentors left and right, and you're kind of mid-level, and you got some people that you can actually talk to. But at that fundamental, like, hey man, you are partying too much, you don't have structure in your day, and we need to get you squared away. So I'm going to do this for you. Watch this, right? And I'm going to do a rhythm with you, and then all you got to do is sustain it after, let's say, a month or so, right? But in a civilian world, like, if you stay up late and you show up tired to work, no one's going to care as long as you're doing your job. And if you're not, you're going to get fired.
Yeah.
In the Army, you can't fire people just like that, right? So you got to kind of help coach them, right?
Yeah.
And if they don't look sharp in their uniform, hey, let me help you out. I'm going to show you how to look sharp in your uniform, right? And hey, like, I noticed, like, you're slacking off. Let's talk about that. I think our soldiers are, especially in my experience being in special operations, our special operation leaders care so deeply. And this is the reason why suicide hurts us so much, is because when you, and I know this from my personal experience, when you have a person who commits suicide who's around a team of people, that care as deeply as we care about mission and as we care as much as we do about people, and how we try to mentor and groom each other and be there for one another. When somebody commits suicide in special operations, it feels horrible, because how did I miss that? How did everybody else miss that? And there's a lot that goes into it. I'm not a psychologist, but what I will say is I know that's the reason why in special operations the leaders care enough to have counselors, to provide the counselors, to be engaged in talking to people. And the HPW, Human Performance and Wellness program that they've got, is as robust as it is because we care about our people. And I think that's another really good aspect to special operations.
Yeah, that's awesome. So now, last question. So if you, because I always tell people this because it's true, somewhere out there's a 22-year-old Bill Haynes trying to figure out what to do with his life. If you can give that person any advice, what would that advice be?
So if the person is inclined to join the military, I would say do it. I would gladly sign up again if I could rewind the clock on my age, right? If I could go back to 18 and join earlier, if I could, rejoin at 22, I would gladly do it, and I'd follow the same path I took. All of those experiences, good and bad, those all made me who I am today, and I'm really good. When I look in the mirror, going back to what my dad has said, and I go to shave in the morning, I like what I see when I look back in the mirror. So I would say do it. Now, the thing is, what are you going to do in the military? So my advice, generally speaking, is this. Back to what my dad had told me. If you're in the military, if you think you're going to do the military for one assignment, one tour, 4 years, 6 years, go get an MOS that is going to give you a trade that you can relate back to the civilian world. Because we need all those people in the Army to make special operations work, right? Because we can't win all the battles. There are times and places where special operations isn't the right answer. It's a niche skill set that won't necessarily win all the different kinds of wars that are out there, right? So if you are trying to make it a career and you think that this is the thing that you're wanting to do, go combat arms, whether it's the Marine Corps, Raiders, Navy SEALs, Air Force PJs, right, TACPs. Those are all great places. You just got to figure out what is going to be your niche. And a lot of times it's about where those people get assigned. So a lot of people don't think about your assignments and where you're going to go. When I knew that 10th Group is in Germany and I, spent a lot of time there as a kid, I'm like, I want to go back to Germany. Well, that means I need to go to be a Green Beret versus being a big army where you're always moving every 3 years. When you think about, and I would say this, right, when you're thinking about stabilizing things for a family, when you think that you spend 3 to 5 years in your group before you move, and you spend another 3 years at SWTG, and then you go back to that same group, you can't expect more stability than that. Yeah. And then for 1-1 and 110 being over in Okinawa and over at Stuttgart, you got another potential PCS. But for me, that's where I wanted to be. There are plenty of people who want to be over in Okinawa, right? Because they're from Asian descent and they want to be in their home country area, right? So I think special operations was wonderful. I thought all the leaders, well, I won't say all the leaders, but by and large, 99% of the leaders all cared. They were all talented individuals. When you realize, when you talk to people and you see how smart people are, and now when you look at our enlisted and how smart they are, when you look at guys and gals coming into SF now they got their associates, bachelors, masters in a lot of cases, it's not a dumb person's world. Now, if you just got a high school education, by all means, come on in. It's the right place for you, but you're going to have to get on top of your college, right? So be physically fit, know what you want to do. If you don't know, reach out to people. There's a network out there on LinkedIn. Hit any vet up, check their profile out. If they sound like and look like they're a professional, more than likely they are, and they're going to give you some decent advice. Advice is for free. Whether you do, what you do with it is up to you. But 100%, I would say special operations is the right place for the people who are willing to put in the work.
Yeah, that's awesome advice. But all right, folks. CSM, again, I appreciate you coming down and speaking with me, guys. If you have any questions or if you have any comments, leave it in the comment section below. Again, that is Special Operations Genesis is the name of the foundation, and the website, correct me if I'm wrong,
Special Operations Genesis.org. Foundation.org.
Okay, yeah. If you want to donate or if you need help, just go to the website, guys, and get the help that you need. All right. Appreciate you guys joining, and until next time, take care of yourselves.